Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast. Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane. The topic of today being the M4C Sherman tank available to the Lend-Lease Commander. At 90 piece and 380 manpower, 135 fuel, it stands a bit above most other medium tanks in the game. And of course you might be asking, what does make it a bit special? Because as you might be noticing, it's not necessarily that durable. Which is also one thing to sort of immediately note about it. It's not something that's going to be taking an awful lot of hits from the enemy and walking away safely. So don't use it like a heavy tank. That's a bit of a starting suggestion right there already with the M4C Sherman. But also in terms of performance, how would you rate it? Overall, I mean, it's sort of like a lighter Panther. Less armor, less penetration, but still something along those lines. It does have higher penetration than most other medium tanks still. For example, it also is reasonably speedy. So for example, I mean, well used, it can actually put up a bit of a threat there to most German tier 3 armor, though of course at the same time a pair of Stugs working together will actually, on the other hand, sort of possess a bit of a threat there to the M4C Sherman. Also a bit like a Panther, it's not necessarily the best thing against infantry. I mean, it might perform slightly better, but overall it's not something that's going to be taking to part German squads with ease. There's also something to note. It's very important to keep in mind, otherwise you might find yourself short one Sherman as well. Airstrike! So keep that in mind, and again, no, it is maneuverable, it can sort of reasonably shift out situations as well, and there we go. One Stug kaput, of course with the support range, but even then, I mean, it generally sort of delivered a nice punch and knocked out that assault gun. So we know roll. Not bad when it comes to the England speed again, you know. Not a heavy tank. Don't expect to go toe-to-toe with a large concentration of German anti-tank fire. It will go up in flames. On the other hand, you can use it to outmaneuver your opponent and cause him harm, cause him grief, cause him pain and sadness. Even. And of course, also note, you do have access to a 50 caliber machine gun on top, which does provide a notable bonus against enemy infantry as well, which is certainly nothing to be scoffed at either. And of course, with the commander you have, it's also not a bad idea, for example, keep, you know, repairing with conscripts and combat engineers, and what else you can actually muster in those departments. So try and keep that in mind as well. In terms of range, I'm not entirely sure it has 40 or 45. I don't think it's quite this full range of a Stug or Panther, but I think it has something approaching either way. Can rapidly pull up, and in, well, 2 shots here, knock out almost the same as Stug. Also noting, in terms of veterans, it's pretty much the same thing as every other Soviet tank, more or less, which is, as it vets up, it gains a much higher rate of fire. Thus, it becomes more mobile, of course, other small things. So in that department, unlike a Panther, Sherman M4C can actually end up with a really high rate of fire, which can certainly give you an advantage against enemy armor. So there's also something, you know, worthwhile keeping in mind while utilizing the M4C Sherman. Certainly trying to keep it alive can give you quite a bit of a weapon to devastate your opponent's Panzer IVs or Stugs. Against a Panther, of course, the M4C Sherman on its own will struggle quite a bit, so be mindful of that as well. And you of course might be wondering, well, what could you use this Sherman with? I mean, you could overall, for example, have it provide support for your T-34s, providing a bit more of an anti-tank punch, if you will, or in support of assault guns and tanks, to just provide a tank in that way. I mean, it can sort of work both ways. Though overall, I mean, it won't, for example, perform anti-infantry use as well as, say, a T-34, either 76 or 85. That is also quite important to keep in mind. Again, not the best against infantry, not the best. And again, not too durable either. In particular, Panzer gunners, for example, can in fact present a bit of a threat here to the M4C Sherman. Otherwise, you know, a pair of assault guns, if you're facing only one, can also provide a bit as long as you handle things correctly. I mean, if you split them up, unsurprisingly, you know, the Sherman might be able to knock them out.
The enemy is taking what we have secured.
So, of course, if you're fighting a larger pack of enemy tanks and you've got one M4C Sherman, you generally want to see if you try split them off or attack one on the edge of things.
Our lines have been cut.
Enemy squad attacking!
Veterancy abilities is pretty much the same as every other tank, secure mode, so nothing special there, though of course it's not bad either. And of course you can get more of the M4C Sherman, that of course is lovely. Can only give you a bit of advantage there. And there we go, one nice hit there on the Panzer IV, forcing him back, half health. I mean, Panzer IV with 180 armor pretty much has no chance of actually striking off the shot there from the M4C Sherman, or at least very small chance there. I mean, that also gives you an idea, you know, have the penetration of this tank compared to other Soviet armor. And of course, why not be a bad idea to, of course, get them in those cases. So, of course, also something to keep in mind as the Germans. You want to be careful around it. For example, if you're using Panzer IVs, you definitely need to be sharp on your toes. Otherwise, you could easily end up with a lost Panzer IV. And as you might also be noticing, the M4C Sherman can also bounce shots from the Panzer IV. So that is also a good thing to keep in mind here. But overall, I mean, otherwise pretty much the same health as a Panzer IV, for example, but otherwise higher penetration, higher speed. So, hopefully with that in mind, you'll have a slightly sharper idea of the M4C Sherman, its strengths and its weaknesses, because, I mean, some people seem to think, you know, it's overly overpowering, others seem to think, you know, it's not much. I mean, it's about understanding its strengths and weaknesses, and then of course sort of working your way from there. Again, it's not going to be, you know, the end of all your woes if you're the enemy. Of course, at the same time as the Germans, it's not going to be the end of the road unless you're all doing something really, really wrong. It's a strong tank because, again, it sort of, you know, follows the concept a bit of the Panther. Again, good against tanks, a bit rubbish against everything else. It's just, you know, lighter in many regards. And again, as the Germans, you want to focus on the fact, again, it's not going to be good against infantry, and it's not going to be able to take a lot of shots. So sort of you want to sort of try and use abilities and quickly sort of sort that out. Pack 40s with target weak point, or Stuks with target weak point, for example, can prove quite helpful. Panzer IVs, you can use that, but then it's going to be down to you maneuvering better than your opponent. A pair of assault guns, for example, on the other hand, could also prove quite helpful. A bit more expensive on the end. At the same time, you can usually get down a higher rate of fire that way and quickly knock it out. Plus, you can shoot from a farther away range if you time things correctly in that way, giving you a bit of advantage. And again, if you are going for the assault guns, don't split them up. Keep them together. Keep them supporting each other, and keep them not too close together either, so they can easily both be outmaneuvered by the Sherman. And of course, the Shermans, I mean, you know, the health is nice, but don't count on the armor or the health to sort of get you through a fight always. I mean, better try to rely on the maneuverability of the M4C Sherman, and of course its high penetration, so that way knock things out. And of course work your way towards quickly getting up some veterancy, and that way increasing its rate of fire, that way increasing its lethality. 50 calibers, not a bad idea overall, and of course always ensure you have some troops to quickly repair it. Conscripts or a bunch of combat engineers, because again, the faster they can get back in the fight, the faster you can get to punishing your opponent's armor. Against heavy armor, of course, you'll want to use larger numbers, since, you know, unless they're highly veteran, you're, for example, going to be struggling against a Panther or a Tiger if you're only using one M4C Sherman. Again, also advisable against versus enemy German armor of tier 3, I mean, you'll usually have the upper hand in a one-to-one scenario unless something interferes, like, say, mines, Panzerschrecks or Panzerfaust, and again, you know, I mean, always in that case, of course, you want to keep your Shermans as well supported. But again, also depending on how you play, they can either be more of a supporter role or sort of the thing being supported, maybe. I mean, overall, rather sort of utilitarian piece of armor that can sort of fit into a lot of different play styles, I think, in supporting them or even pushing them. But again, you know, not great versus infantry and not durable. That's always something to keep in mind when dealing with the M4C Sherman. So, this is Imperial Dane saying, I hope you've learned something. I hope you might have gotten a bit clearer idea of the Sherman, how to use it, how to fight it. If you did, want to subscribe, tell your friend, share with everyone. If not, you know, send in a replay and provide some feedback in the comments. This is Imperial Dane saying cheers and see you tomorrow.